day, everyone. Welcome to the session, Protecting Containers with Spectrum Protect Plus. My name is Greg Van Hise. I work on Spectrum Protect architecture and technical strategy. Today, I'm joined with my pups, Bella and Daisy. Their job is to make this a fun place to work. They're key members of the team, my trusted advisors, and of course, one of my best friends. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to join this session. Very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about our container data protection solution. From an agenda perspective, we'll start with a few opening thoughts from Bella. I'll take you through an update and roadmap on our container support, and Daisy will provide a few closing thoughts. All right, so let's get this going. Here's our standard IBM disclaimer chart regarding roadmaps and directions. And from that point, we thought we'd kick it off with talking about key consideration, I think, for you is to provide or to look at a mature and reliable data protection solution. Kubernetes has matured rapidly over its lifetime of 6 years, and also we're intending to release our 3rd generation of container data protection support this November. Bella would like to remind you that when you think about a data protection solution, you want maturity, reliability to make sure you're not chasing your tail. Okay. So let's kind of start with a bit of a container data protection market overview. Data protection becoming a more pressing concern in a Kubernetes environment, certainly in the early stages of adoption. Key metrics, as indicated here, that we follow are production deployments and stateful applications deployed into Kubernetes OpenShift environments. And you can pick your survey to confirm the trends that these metrics are accelerating rapidly. To me, key is what IDC says in the lower left-hand portion of this chart, that by 2022, 35% of the production applications will be cloud native, utilizing microservices, containers, Kubernetes orchestration. So to summarize from this chart, would recommend, if possible, you get on board with containers, Kubernetes, and OpenShift. The train's coming. There's certainly a ways to go in full-scale adoption. I'm personally starting to see more and more interest. I believe 2021 will be where we see the increased adoption of data protection for these Kubernetes OpenShift environments. The technology pieces are getting put in place to where I think it's possible in 2021. And then as IDC says, 2022 will be the time when things become mainstream. Okay, so let's start by kind of also looking at kind of framing things in the context of who are the key users in this environment. On the right-hand side of the chart, I think probably a lot of who I'm talking to today, the central IT operations folks, the backup storage admins, typical targets for our Spectrum Protect portfolio using. Key requirements would be to provide consistent centralized management of heterogeneous set of workloads, which in this case would include Kubernetes and OpenShift. And I would say kind of to characterize, many times this group of users doesn't have that much Kubernetes expertise yet. That Kubernetes hasn't reached mainstream yet. But so those questions, and then I'll say contrast that a bit. If you look on the left-hand side of the chart, the DevOps teams, they're the application developers, writing cloud-native applications, operations teams, administering Kubernetes and OpenShift. They get the resiliency characteristics built into Kubernetes, replica sets, but I don't think they really understand necessarily a lot of the data protection considerations, and I think that's where, folks like you on this call can help bridge that gap, helping them understand data corruption considerations, why you need data protection, ransomware considerations, long-term retention, replicating for disaster recovery. We get all these things, but I think it's a little bit of a foreign concept to some of these app developers and a good opportunity for you to provide value in working with them. The other observation, a key point I wanted to mention is self-service is critical, we believe, in these environments. With Kubernetes, the developer can declare the way they want what they want via YAML file, and they can send that to Kubernetes via a kubectl CLI command. And so that basically you have that self-service access to Kubernetes services, resources, et cetera. And I'll say, in contrast with, opening tickets, routing to help desks, satisfying tickets, and carrying on that way. So self-service protection key from a data protection perspective. We want to provide that same kind of pattern for our capabilities and the same interface with Kubernetes CLI. So to wrap this chart up, if you look at the middle, VMware had a survey where they questioned who owns the strategy for Kubernetes. Basic conclusion from that was multiple teams involved. And as a generalization, I put a pendulum in the middle of this chart, and I would say in general, I think early in the adoption cycle, the pendulum tends to swing for key influencers, recommenders to that side of the adopters of the early technology, in this case, the DevOps kind of teams. And then over time, the pendulum kind of swings back to the central IT and its associated efficiencies. So just kind of an observation on the different users and the message, to be able to work with, it's key to be able to work with these DevOps folks and provide the data protection services for them. So this chart, when we talk about key technology considerations, wanted to frame it in the context of two categories of data that we provide protection for. One is the stateful application data that's saved on persistent volume claims, and also the other is the etcd cluster metadata. With Kubernetes, most of the cluster's operational state, deployment descriptors is maintained in this etcd key value data store. Application configurations also maintained there, and things called config maps, passwords maintained in this key value data store called secrets. And you can kind of draw some loose analogies, I think, to the etcd database to a vSphere database in the VMware context, right? So two key sets of resources to protect for the persistent volumes we rely on, and we believe the right strategy is to use the container storage interface snapshot capabilities. CSI provides an industry standard API for integrating storage, in-place storage snapshots into the Kubernetes infrastructure, allows third-party storage providers, whether it's IBM, whether it's Red Hat, Portworx, EMC, pick your third-party storage vendor, to plug in and provide a common way, in our case, to provide CSI snapshotting for these persistent volumes. The other key, the etcd metadata, what we believe is the right approach is to rely on, we're going to use an open source technology called Bolero. It has mindshare with the Kubernetes community, extensive Kubernetes metadata capture capabilities. I think it's important to be, where appropriate, to leverage open source technologies, and specifically from our perspective, I think Bolero provides a strong foundation for our Kubernetes support you'll see going forward. And also, Red Hat, I work with them weekly on this, and we're interlocked from a strategic perspective. And for OpenShift, Red Hat is going to package up Bolero into a set of APIs called the OpenShift APIs for data protection, of which will be the first, I believe, consumers of those APIs. And the idea is to enable, from an OpenShift perspective, to enable an ecosystem of backup vendors. And you can certainly draw some parallels to things like VMware APIs for data protection, VADP. Red Hat is providing the same, kind of concept with the OADPs and based on the Bolero technology. So to summarize, I think we have the right set of foundational technologies, CSI snapshots for persistent volumes, Bolero for protecting the cluster etcd metadata in those environments, and just want you to have that as a takeaway. So what do we have available today? 10.16 G8 in June. With this release, we have, I'd say, good support for application data, being able to snapshot those PVCs. And as shown on the right-hand side of this chart, we have awareness of Kubernetes namespace label selectors so that we can snapshot a group of PVCs together. Just to emphasize again, deep Kubernetes integration. If you're familiar, there's things called Kubernetes controllers, custom resource definitions for how you request Kubernetes services, like in our case, backups. So we have our own set of custom resources to allow us integration into that Kubernetes CLI, kubectl CLI interface that the application developer is working in. And we also have tightly integrated with Spectrum Protect Plus, as I think you would probably expect, right? So we have, from that perspective, consistent management of Kubernetes, non-Kubernetes workloads, SLA-based definitions of policies, central management of clusters, recovery wizards, central reporting. I think you guys kind of get the message on that. Okay, so also wanted to give you a bit of a view what's coming next. What's coming next is this fourth quarter, we announced at TechU that we'll have our next release of our container data protection support coming out. And from a high level, we're really addressing three areas. Kubernetes build out, we're introducing OpenShift support, key to us, and then IBM Cloud Paks, basically the IBM strategy for containerizing its middleware software and providing protection for that based on, those Cloud Paks are based on OpenShift as well. So So 3 key areas for us with our fourth quarter release: Kubernetes, OpenShift, and Cloud Paks. On the right-hand side of the chart, you see all that blue area. That's what I was kind of talking about, all that etcd metadata, the config map, secrets, deployments. We're going to be able to capture all of that. In a Kubernetes environment, we'll be directly invoking Velero. In an OpenShift environment, we'll be, I'll say, using the OpenShift APIs, which are fundamentally based on Velero under the covers, to be able to protect the OpenShift environment, and leveraging OpenShift extensions to provide value add for above and beyond the Velero Kubernetes support. And also, what we're introducing in the fourth quarter release is containerization of our SPP server. So when you think about those Kubernetes OpenShift administrators, if they want to be able to deploy a management server into the environment, we allow SPP to be deployed into OpenShift environments. Also, just have from an overall perspective, the integration specifically on our Cloud Pak journey, we're starting with Cloud Pak for MCM with a basic UI launch integration. And I think I can actually jump into the next chart to kind of give you a view of that. And what we have here is, in the top of this picture, we have the Cloud Pak for Multi-Cloud Manager. MCM targets the cloud administrator being able to centrally manage VMware, Kubernetes, OpenShift workloads. Today from a performance, event, governance perspective, and what we're doing is adding data protection as an additional management discipline integrated into Cloud Pak for MCM with our UI launch, with the benefits being the simple user experience, ease of management that you see at the bottom part of this chart. Okay, to emphasize a bit, the other key deliverable for us in fourth quarter is our OpenShift support. We provide specifically OCP 4.5 and 4.6 with OpenShift Container Storage 4.6 as the specific releases that we can support in a production deployment. We'll be able to protect the PVCs via CSI snapshotting, the etcd metadata, using the OpenShift APIs for data protection based on Velero. And we also, like I mentioned, containerized our SPP server so that can be deployed into an OpenShift environment, leveraging the OpenShift APIs for data protection, Red Hat operator certification. So hopefully you kind of get the overall message that, OpenShift important to us, and we're doing a lot in that, building on, I would say, our strong Kubernetes foundation. You'll certainly see us attacking both environments going forward. All right, with this chart, just wanted to do a couple of purposes. One is to kind of give you a flow for what the backups look like, to kind of give you an overview. So what we have here on the left-hand side of the chart, we have an OpenShift cluster. And the basic things I wanted to point out to you is, that CSI snapshotting, where we create these in-place crash-consistent storage snapshots at the storage layer. And then we're able to, so you can kind of think about, I want to do that once every 4 hours, say. And then let's say once a day, I want to capture the most recent storage snapshot, and let's move that over to a vSnap server, which exists outside of the Kubernetes cluster. And, there can be reasons from a fault domain perspective, et cetera, that, you want to have that outside there. So that's basically the model: persistent storage snapshots, the ability to copy off to our vSnap server, and then all the backend data management you would expect, right? Asynchronous replication to a remote vSnap server, offload to object storage targets, or, to a Spectrum Protect server. Think about tape too. If you're thinking about a ransomware tape air gap kind of solution, those are all available for our Kubernetes OpenShift support. A couple items of note to mention here again, just to reinforce: our Spectrum Protect Plus server can now be deployed as a container into the OpenShift environment, or it can still be a virtual appliance, an OVA appliance as today. We added our support for the etcd metadata protection. And we also, one thing I didn't mention yet is we can protect a cluster. In addition to protecting a namespace or label, we can now have the ability to say, I want to protect the entire cluster, which basically means snapshot all the PVCs and all the namespaces within that cluster and capture all the cluster scoped resources such that you can restore that in the event of a corruption, or restore it to an alternate location, which is on the right-hand side here. The ability that we're adding in our latest release is not only returning the data back from where it came, but to be able to restore into an alternate location, alternate cluster. We added support for IBM Spectrum virtualized flash systems based on the IBM CSI block driver. So you can think about Spectrum virtualized variance flash systems. We're able to plug into this Red Hat OpenShift container storage, specifically the RBD or the block support we have now that we're expanding. And you kind of get the message that we'll be building this out more over time. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea about the basic data flows, the basic use cases highlighted on the right that we support. All right, just to kind of wrap things up here, from my perspective, key takeaways would like you to have. One is IBM, we're all in on Kubernetes and OpenShift. Investment is important, focus is important, and from, I've been in this business a long time, and to me, there's great alignment from corporate, down to, I'll say, IBM middleware, containerizing things, shipping things via Cloud Paks, to IBM storage, having our storage plug into and support OpenShift Kubernetes environments, to our data protection offerings, right? From top to bottom, we're all kind of singing the same song, I would guess. And you kind of get the $34 billion investment IBM made in Red Hat. From a data protection perspective, we're also aggressively investing in this space. So that's key. Also, I think demonstrating that we're on the leading edge of this adoption cycle. We've demonstrated first mover advantages, both in our use of CSI snapshotting technology and being the first to adopt the OpenShift APIs for data protection for protecting OpenShift clusters. There's a lot of key new users we got to think about. That app developer mentioned the importance of self-service, integration with Kubernetes, custom resources. The kubectl CLI is key for that app developer. The Kubernetes OpenShift administrator being able to deploy a management server directly into that OpenShift environment is important for them. From a backup administrator perspective, being able to centrally manage Kubernetes OpenShift environments consistent with VMware, bare metal, et cetera, right? We have our SLAs, common reporting, common management capabilities. And just want to emphasize a bit too, third release of our container data protection support we're planning for November. So I think we're demonstrating that we're maturing the offering ahead of the real mainstream adoption, which I think is a exciting place to be in, right? So we're well positioned for when that wave hits. And also, maturity from another perspective, being able to take our data protection capabilities that we have built in over years, decades, et cetera, on the whole lifecycle management, being able to add that in for replications, disaster recovery, long-term retention, all of those kind of management capabilities, bringing that into the Kubernetes environment. Okay, so what Daisy would like to kind of wrap up this session with then, you really want to consider, to the point on the last chart, a holistic converged solution. Don't just try to plug holes in your backup data protection strategy, but look at a complete solution. And so with that, I'll leave you with that. Very much appreciate your time. Hope this session was valuable, and take care.